Today it's Afghanistan, tomorrow maybe Iran or Pakistan. The dogs bark, the caravan moves on. But almost a decade ago, it was the war in Kosovo, the largely Albanian enclave, whose demands for freedom triggered war with Serbia. There were notorious atrocities perpetrated by Serb forces, engendering sympathy for their Albanian victims. But that isn't the complete picture. Disturbing evidence has now emerged about kidnapping, murder and even organ theft in the dark days after the war. Nick Thorpe reports.
Kosovo turns a fresh face to the future, Europe's youngest and most controversial state. The path to independence has not been easy for this tiny, star-shaped land trapped between Serbia and Albania. From 1998 to 99, the ethnic Albanian Kosovo Liberation Army fought a bitter guerrilla war against the Serb police and army. The price paid by Albanian civilians was enormous. Villages were surrounded and shelled. Thousands died. And 800,000 Albanians were expelled, not simply from their homes, but from their homeland. NATO forces intervened to stop the ethnic cleansing and forced the Serb military out of Kosovo. They left in fury a land they regarded as their own. And the tables turned. As NATO peacekeepers struggled to establish order, Albanians sought revenge. A period of terror for the remaining Serb civilians. Brankica Antic was one of those Serbs whose family fled Kosovo to escape the violence. She has returned to her native Prizren for the first time in 10 years to talk to us about her husband Zlatko. She says he was abducted by Kosovo Liberation Army soldiers after the war.
We always light candles for their health and well-being, and we will continue to do so unless and until their bodies are found and we know for a fact that they are gone. He will always be alive for me until his body is found and we know for a fact that he is dead. This is not only for my husband, but for all the families of the kidnapped and missing persons.
So where were Zlatko and all the others taken? One former detainee said that some captives were kept in this village, in shacks behind the houses. Kosovo was swarming with NATO peacekeepers. They passed within meters, while their guards smiled and waved. The detainees were too scared to cry out. After the war, our sources say, dozens of people rounded up by the KLA were driven across this border from Kosovo into Albania. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of refugees were coming home in the other direction. And NATO soldiers at the border didn't notice. The following account was given by a former KLA driver about his own role in the crimes he describes. It was made available to UN investigators. We have the original recording, but the translation of his words is read by an actor, because his safety, like other sources in this film, is at risk.
They told me I had to transport some people to Albania. There were 3 men, prisoners, all civilians. Based on what they were wearing, they looked like villagers. Their hands were tied behind their backs, and they were fastened to the inside of the van. 3 Kosovar Albanians were riding in the car in front of us. There were 2 others with guns riding in the back. It was dusk when we left.
Some of those abducted were taken across the border from Prizren in Kosovo to Kukes. The town was a key supply base for the Kosovo Liberation Army during the war. Prisoners were also held here. Few who survived dared to tell the tale, but this man did. His testimony makes clear that prisoners of different ethnicities, including Serbs, were transported from Kosovo into Albania. We have disguised his voice.
They ill-treated people in the corridor. They also came into the rooms in groups of 5 or 6 to question us. And they used knives, guns and automatic rifles. They did things to us that you wouldn't even do to animals.
How do you know there were Serbs there as well?
I know the language well. When a person is ill-treated and screams, he cries out, "Oh, mother," in his own language.
This is the factory, the former KLA camp where we believe the prisoners were kept. 10 years on, the gates he describes are still the same. And just through there, I can make out the iron bars on the windows where he says he was shackled.
You know, this is where our source came.
These stories of kidnapping and murder were first discovered by the American journalist Michael Montgomery.
Many of the men we interviewed were in the KLA, and to this day, many of them still believe in the cause, that is, their cause of independence from Serbia. But they also say that there was an underside of that war, of their war, and an underside to the men who were fighting the war, which was not about independence. It was about other things. It was about revenge, it was about killings, it was about greed.
One of the victims was buried here. There are probably others.
This was very difficult to get this kind of information. The men who knew about it were very reticent about talking. But when we did start developing a picture, when a picture started emerging of these camps, of the detentions, of the beatings and the killings, we eventually decided to go to the people whose job it was to find these missing, and that is the UN Office of Missing Persons.
The stories became more sinister. Some led us through the mountains to central Albania, to this house in a remote valley near Burel. We visited it to see for ourselves. There were rumors that people were killed here for their organs. A driver described delivering captives here. This is an extract from his statement.
When we brought the first group from Kosovo to Burel, I heard that they were checking them, that doctors were checking them and taking blood samples. And they were asking whether they'd been beaten or mistreated. This was confusing. Why worry about their health? I later heard something about prisoners or their kidneys going to the airport. I heard they were going to Turkey.
Michael shared these stories with the UN team searching for the missing. When they visited the house in February 2004, they found that one room had traces of blood over almost the entire floor. Near the house was a rubbish dump where they found
a number of surgical elements that were not necessarily expected from such a rural place, such as surgical coveralls, an IV drip, and some vials of a muscle relaxant that, according to my doctors at the time at the office, is commonly used in surgical proceedings.
The family say there's an innocent explanation.
Of course they found it. We've got an older father, an older grandfather, a little brother who doesn't feel well. It's very difficult for an ambulance to get here, or for us to get to the hospital in Burel. Sometimes the local medic comes to do drips, and we'll throw it here. This is our dump.
The family is adamant, but their explanations have been inconsistent. Suspicions remain, which the local deputy in the Albanian parliament says have harmed the family and damaged the region's honor.
We are open to any investigation that has to bring once again the truth in evidence. So we are sure that nothing has happened, and so when you are on the side of the right, you are not afraid about that.
The investigators' evidence was transferred to the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague, but prosecutors concluded that their hands were tied, as these crimes allegedly took place after the war. The UN mission in Kosovo could have pursued the investigation, for example in a local graveyard, but chose not to. Human rights groups say the mission's record on war crimes is lamentable.
To see a UN body failing to abide by the international standards to which it holds its member states accountable is really quite shocking. And more than that, the impact on the families who want to know the fate of their family members. They want to know where their bodies are. They want to know what happened to them.
War crimes cases are stored today in the basement of the former UN headquarters. Very few ever led to prosecutions. There was a reluctance in the UN mission to risk upsetting Kosovo's rulers, many of them ex-KLA commanders, and stability seemed more important than justice. So the documents gathered dust.
These files have never been filmed before. Without a shadow of doubt, they contain the answers to some of the most painful questions from the war and its aftermath, details of the victims and perpetrators. Less a can of worms, more a bucket full of them.
The remains of hundreds of still unidentified people are stored here at Pristina Hospital. Nearly 2,000 people are still missing. Investigations of kidnapping, murder and even theft of organs may face another problem. The Serbian war crimes prosecutor says the tribunal has destroyed the medical evidence gathered from Borel. We asked the tribunal whether this is true. We received this written response.
As this is currently an ongoing investigation of the Serbian Office of the War Crimes Prosecutor, we are regrettably not in a position to respond to your specific questions.
Mr. Bareba believes that the evidence his team collected has been destroyed.
This is not the first time that evidence is destroyed in tribunal. I mean, I would say incompetence. I think there's still a lack of understanding, despite so many years, of the complexities of the type of evidence associated to this kind of uncommon crimes.
During the war, Hashim Thaçi was political director of the Kosovo Liberation Army. He's now the first Prime Minister of an independent Kosovo. I put it to him that his men were responsible for crimes against civilians during and after the war.
After the war, there was misuse of the uniform of the Kosovo Liberation Army. There were people coming from different parts and pretending that they belonged to the KLA, who did some bad things in the name of the KLA. But we have distanced ourselves from those people. The misuse was minimal.
Here in Kosovo, there's a great reluctance to look into the darker side of what they see as their war of liberation. There are other challenges now, they say, the challenges of independence. But basic questions remain unanswered.
Do these peaceful hills conceal the bodies of the missing, of all nationalities? Or do they lie in unmarked graves beyond Kosovo's borders?